Friday morning continues on Ramon, Kayla, and Will, RKW. Ramon Foster, Kayla Anderson, Will Bowling. Jackson Williams is our producer as we are joined from Knoxville by VolQuest's Brent Hubbs, previewing a big one between Tennessee and Oklahoma tomorrow night. Brent, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hope you guys are doing well this morning.
We are wonderful. I will say this before we get into this matchup. If you listen to this segment, you have learned something that was about to happen in the next game. Brent, 2 weeks ago, you talked about 12 personnel and the 2 tight ends for Tennessee against NC State. Big check mark there. And then last week, talking about Mike Matthews getting some run. I'd say he got some run last week. I should just ask you just off the top, like, what are we going to see tomorrow that you can just foretell? What do you see in your crystal ball up there at East Tennessee?
I don't know that there's anything necessarily new in the crystal ball. Obviously, all eyes are going to be on the left tackle position and what happens with Lance Hurd, who's listed as questionable for this game. And if it's not Lance Hurd, then I think Tennessee probably goes Dane Davis there and keeps John Campbell on the right side. I don't think they'll flip. But they could flip, but I don't think they will. And so we'll see what happens with Lance Hurd. That's the big storyline that's popped up late this week with the new SEC injury report that comes out on Wednesday. So we'll see, what happens with that and figure it out moving forward. I do think James Pierce has a chance to have a big day. This might be the breakout game for James Pierce.
So, Brent, when you look at this matchup, where does Tennessee have the biggest advantage, in your opinion, against Oklahoma?
13 grown men on the defensive line for a couple of reasons. One, I think they're really talented. I think we saw that in the NC State game. I think they are mature. They're older group. There's not a bunch of young guys in there. They're playing some young guys, but everybody's generally a junior and senior in that group. And the heat index is going to be 100 Saturday afternoon and going to be around 95 at kickoff. I think the low is going to be in the mid 80s by mid second half to late second half in that game. So the heat could be a factor. And I think when you're rotating as frequently as Tennessee is rotating, then I think that could be an advantage for you in a game like this. Even though Oklahoma's set to get a couple of offensive linemen back, I do think it's an advantage for Tennessee because they can rotate the bodies. I mean, Tennessee has played Dominic Bailey's played 59 snaps and 3 games, and that's the most of any defensive lineman on the roster. They do not have an interior defensive lineman. Of the 6 guys they rotate, those guys have not played a combined, as an individual, they've not played 50 snaps in 3 games combined. That's got to be an advantage for Tennessee going into this game.
Hubs, man, I hate that I missed you last Friday, man. I just got to say, missed you. I hope you missed me too, Hubs.
I did miss you. I'm glad everything's okay. I know, working, 2 straight full weeks during football season can be a challenge, but I'm glad that you found a way to get back on the practice field and get yourself ready to go. So I did miss you, and it's good to have you back.
I appreciate you playing my childish
Probable
games.
For this week's interview, Ramon Foster on these SEC injury reports. Probable. He is here.
We're all stunned that Ramon's back for a big game.
That's when the scouts are there, Hubs. That's when the scouts are there, man. But what I do love is reading the War Room. If y'all aren't subscribed to VolQuest, go do that, man. The Friday write-ups are phenomenal, man. But what I also love is when you start talking your trash. It's like Tennessee's got over 1,009 yards on the ground. They can do it 2 tights, outside zone, inside zone, stretch, power, whatever you want to do. RPOs, 2 tights don't matter. Is that the plan this weekend, is just to open up the game and say, hey, how you going to stop us and watch us adjust?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of where Tennessee's at in the run game right now. And they've always been versatile, Ramon. I mean, offensive line play in the run game. I mean, they've always had some versatility to it, but they've got more versatility right now than they've ever had. The quarterback can run the true RPO game. That wasn't Joe Milton's forte in terms of, pulling it and keeping it. Obviously, Nico can do that. We saw in 22 with Princeton Fant that they would run, kind of that H-back lead, if you will. They're back to doing some of that. They're comfortable with Holden Stays and Kitzelman and even Ethan Davis as a lead blocker and more of a traditional run game, almost looking like an I formation. And as I mentioned, you can go outside stretch, you can go inside zone, which is a bread and butter play for them. And Dylan Sampson feels creases as well as anybody. And I'm not taking anything away from Jalen Wright, who had a great year last year. You'd take Jalen Wright in a heartbeat back on this team to complement with Dylan Sampson. But Dylan Sampson's a different back than Jalen Wright. I think he can run outside zone, outside stretch, and inside zone combined probably a little better than Jalen Wright could. And then you throw in the 12 personnel, and that's unique. So what are you going to do, Brent Venables? Are you going to load the box? If you do, then Tennessee's going to try to win the one-on-one matchups over the top. If you're going to go to drop coverage, then Tennessee is going to run the football. Here's the kryptonite. If a team can line up with their base front and handle your run game with a, quote, lighter box, and they don't have to commit more people, then Tennessee's got trouble, because now you can play some safety help over the top in the back end. And that's what Georgia's been able to do the last couple of years, and that's why Tennessee's not effectively run the football against them. Can Oklahoma handle Tennessee's run game with a light box? If they can, then it becomes a tougher day for Tennessee's offense. If they can't, then it gives Tennessee matchup wins or potential matchup wins across the board, both in the run game and in the passing game by the different formations that Tennessee can run.
I always hear about ROI, right? Return of investment, right? Mm-hmm. Can Nico sling it if you need him to and win this football game? I think that's where a lot of folks are at.
Well, I think he can. I mean, I don't think we have any evidence through 3 games that he can't do that. Now, Pat Ryan said it best on the broadcast last week when I asked him to assess Nico against Kent State. And so he threw some pretty ones and he threw some stinkers, and it's not going to be perfect. Here's where I wonder a little bit is we've got to see what does Tennessee's receiver core do if some corners and some DBs just crawl up in their face and try to get physical with them and grab and tug and hold, and can they get away with that with an officiating crew? Sometimes, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but I mean, I think that's what Georgia did in 22 is they just kind of hugged and grabbed from play one, and the officials weren't going to throw a penalty on every play. And Tennessee didn't do a good job physically against press man and tight coverage, physical coverage. Does Oklahoma try to subscribe to that theory? Do they go there? Can Tennessee win on a consistent basis outside? I like their chances with Chris Brazzell and Brew McCoy. And if they can keep Nico upright, then yeah, I think Nico can make the throws. I do. Or does Oklahoma get home with some pressure, and Tennessee has a hard time keeping Nico upright. He got hit a little bit more than I would like in the NC State game. Now, some of that was on Nico, some of that was on the offensive line. How do they handle?
Brent Helms joining us this morning on RKW, as he does every Friday. You mentioned Brew McCoy and Chris Brazzell. They're actually the only 2 wide receivers to play 100-plus snaps so far this season, Brent. How much more could it be for an opportunity for not only those guys, but some of these other wide receivers to get involved?
Well, I mean, they've only played they just haven't. They've played Trey Weary. He's probably played the 4th or 5th most snaps of a wide receiver as a walk-on just because they've set everybody down. I think you're going to see more Squirrel White. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think you're going to see some more Dante Thornton than what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Dante's been dealing with a little bit of a growing issue, and I think that's why you haven't seen him as involved as you saw him in the Chattanooga game. So I think there's a chance he could be more involved because he is much closer to 100%. We saw Mike Matthews. I do think Tennessee's rotation will trim a little bit, but you're going to see that core group of guys do their thing. I think Chaz Nimrod's playing well right now. I think they feel pretty comfortable with 5 or 6 guys in this game. With the heat and the weather, you're probably going to play that many. And so I think you'll get a little more of a set rotation than what we've seen in 2 out of these 3 games, really 3 out of the 3 games. When you talk about the second half, you were playing walk-ons and you were playing your 3rd and 4th team guys. I don't think you'll see that in this game. I think you'll see a tighter rotation with more reps for your handful of 5 or 6 elite guys, if you will.
Brent, I was talking to former Vol cornerback Gabe Jeudy-Lally yesterday in the Titans locker room, and we were just talking Vols and about this game, and he had mentioned that he thought, even last year, the defense was pretty stout, except for, I think a lot of the attention was on what the offense wasn't doing. I'm curious if you agree with that, and maybe what's even made them more of a powerful defense this year.
Well, I don't think they were bad last year. Now, the problem was they couldn't get off the field in the first quarter against Missouri. I think Missouri had the ball 11 of the 15 minutes of the first quarter, maybe 13 of the first 15 minutes of the game, which is a bad look for your defense. They didn't get off the field on 3rd and long in the first half against Florida, which is where the game got away from you there. So they had some moments that were just,
Yep.
You get a team in 3rd and 9, I think 3 or 4 times in the first half at Florida, and you give up a first down every time. It's a bad look for the defense. It doesn't, they didn't play well, so to speak. I think where this team is different, or this defense is different, they're better on the up front, even though they were good last year. They're just, I think, a year better from a maturity and a physical standpoint. I think they're vastly improved at linebacker. I think getting Keenan Peely back is a big deal. I think Arian Carter with a year off season to get comfortable in this defense. Same for Jeremiah Telander. I think through 3 games, they've been vastly better at the linebacker position. Their eyes have been good. They're benefiting from a defensive front that's been active and keeping guys off of them. But they've missed 1 tackle in 3 games at the linebacker position. I think that's pretty good. I think Jermon McCoy at corner has been a huge addition to this team. And they're more athletic back there, but I think they're benefiting greatly from the pass rush of the front 4 and even the front 7 when they bring some extra pressure. Think about this. Tennessee has played 3 games, and the 3 teams combined have tried to throw the ball in the air 20 yards or more 3 times in 3 games. Now, why is that? Do they have a quarterback who can't throw it that far, or are they just afraid that they can't hold up long enough in pass pro to get a ball off? All I know is that nobody's tried to throw it over Tennessee's head. Now, I think Jackson Arnold will on Saturday, so that'll be a different challenge for this secondary. They're going to get tested like they've not been tested to this point. But if Tennessee's front can do what they can do, it'll give them a cheat sheet, if you will, to that test, because they're going to get a big help out of those guys.
VolQuest Brent Hubbs with us. Brent, Josh Heupel has said all the right things leading up to his return to Norman. 2000 team is going to be honored before this game. A lot of folks that he has a lot of good memories with will be in town for a massive, massive game for those in Norman, Oklahoma. How do you think he will handle that emotion? I know he said the right things publicly, but behind the scenes, what is the feeling around just his level of emotion? And just, Josh Heupel as well as anybody. The guy is very publicly facing, so good, and it doesn't say a ton of the media, but he's got a killer instinct behind the scenes to him as well.
No doubt. And I think the biggest thing for Josh is just get the kickoff. Get the ball in the air and start playing, and then I think it becomes much easier. And, you're right. He said all the right things, and he was asked on ball calls Wednesday night if he would take a moment at some point and reflect. And, he just kind of deflected that question, said, yeah, at some point after the game or whatever. I'm going to tell you right now, he can talk about it all he wants to. I think it's human nature that sometime during pregame warm-ups, while his team's stretching and coaches are out there at midfield twirling their whistle and doing whatever it is that they do, talking to each other and all that, he's going to look around that stadium and it's going to hit him. And then he's going to get it out of his system and have to get it out of his system. It's kind of like the guy who says, I'm not nervous before my wedding or whatever, but, he's going to have a moment where he's like, oh, I'm really doing this. And he's going to have a moment where it's like, I'm really coaching in this stadium with another team, and a bunch of my teammates are here, and there's going to be that surreal moment. I think he'll get past it quickly, but there is some moment, in my opinion, during pregame warmups where it'll hit him, and he'll have to get through it, and he will, and move on. Once the ball's in the air and they're starting to play, you're so dialed in because of pace of play. I don't think there will be anything that catches his attention, even if they're playing stuff on Jumbotron between, possessions and that type of thing, or after the first quarter. I think he'll be locked in and focused, but I just can't help but think he's going to have a moment during warm-ups where it's like, holy smokes, this is like, wow, all right, I'm back. Now, the challenge for him a little bit too will be coach the game for that game, play field position, do the right things that you need to do. Don't try to flex your offensive muscle and go for it on 4th and 8 at your 38 early in the game to show everybody your offense works. And I don't think he will because he believes too much in his defense. But I do think he'll have a moment early on.
Hubs, one thing I think I'm being conditioned to is the super senior / transfer portal type of players. And a couple of those guys, Keenan Peely, Amari Thomas, right, are those guys that you need specifically this weekend and in the big games where they're settled down. With that being said, they've acknowledged Coach Heupel hadn't made this week about himself at all, but Jackson Arnold also. We've seen in years past, and Amari's been a part of watching running quarterbacks extend plays. How much of a focus has that been for this defense this week? As we've seen, and I brought it up numerous times already, Ole Miss do it, South Carolina do it, Florida do it, games where they were supposed to get off the field and you have a running quarterback extend plays. Where has been the focus this week on that?
Huge focus. Rush lanes, big-time focus. Rallying to the ball. This team has tackled well, but your linebackers' eyes have to be great. You have to – if you're backside containing on an RPO zone read, you got to stay backside first. You can't slide down the line and give up contain. You've got to stay in you've got to stay in your route and your lane, if you will, and do what you're supposed to do there. So I think it's a big part, and it's been a big focal point of Rodney Garner's, and that's where you like the experience of this team, particularly up front, that you think those guys are going to do that. Now, I think one of the interesting, if you go deep in the weeds in the matchup deal, is 2 years ago in Baton Rouge against LSU with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. Now, he was just learning that system. LSU was really young at tackle, and they were young across the offensive line. Tennessee ran a ton of stunts and twists that day. They played a lot of games with their front four. We saw Joshua Josephs get his first career sack on a stunt and a twist. I'm curious to see if Tennessee does much of that to try to confuse a offensive line for Oklahoma that's not played together, this group. They don't have a ton of continuity. Can they create some confusion there? Are you hesitant to do that because of the mobile quarterback? I think that's something to keep an eye on within the game, because I do think Tennessee can confuse that front, but do you take yourself out of contained positions when you do that? That's a decision Rodney Garner and Tim Banks have to make in their game plan.
Brent, on the way out, there have not been a lot of concerts in Neyland Stadium, and I know there is concern always when there is one over the field and the conditions of that after the concert happens. What is Tennessee's plan to make sure that 2 nights of Morgan Wallen in front of sold-out audiences this weekend doesn't get somebody hurt?
Well, the first thing they're going to do, Morgan Wallen is supposed to get out of here it'll take all day Monday to get this stuff out. It's taking them all week to set that thing up. So they'll get out and they'll start working as soon as the Sunday night concert is over, and they'll work all night, Sunday night, Monday morning, and sometime Monday afternoon. They should have their staging out and get most of the stuff covering the field out. And then Tennessee's plan right now is to dig up the turf, remove the turf on Tuesday, and replace the turf on Thursday, and that'll give them about, 2 weeks. I don't do math very well, but that'll give them around probably 15 days or so to have the new turf sewn in and attached and ready to go. Everybody's comfortable with it. It was discussed ad nauseum before they ever agreed to let Morgan Wallen play in the stadium. But the plan right now is to remove the turf. I don't think they'll change their mind on that. I think that they feel like there's just going to be so much on that turf with 2 concerts that they're going to go ahead and remove it and put a new playing surface down. But again, that's always a concern for fans, and I'm sure it'll be a concern for some people to make sure that gets sewn in. But in talking to the maintenance people and turf people out there, the NFL does it frequently. And
sure does.
There's a comfort level that the turf's going to be sewn in, and it's not going to come up in chunks, and it's not going to be any kind of health hazard for Tennessee when they host Florida a couple of weeks after this concert is over. So that's the plan right now. I guess anything could change, but that as it stands right now, that's the plan.
VolQuest Brent Hubbs joins us Fridays here on RKW. A big one to preview tomorrow between Tennessee and Oklahoma. Excellent as always. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Yes, sir. There's Brent Hubbs. That turf monster was a problem my freshman year at Tennessee when the field was bad. It's been good ever since then.
Mm-hmm.
I remember they got rid of the field and they filled in our cross-country course with the old Neyland turf. And we were like, I thought this was bad grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, give us cross country.
So I guess we could tear our ACLs.
Right.
So, I
No,
couldn't
I'm
imagine,
halfway
though,
joking.
this weekend for Morgan Wallen, whoever the artist is, getting to a point to where you sell out a stadium
I'm excited to go.
on 2 nights.
I will be there Sunday.
Can you imagine the ego that you have to suppress?
Very excited.
Some of them don't do it well.
Oh, my gosh.
Very excited to see that show live.
Congrats to him.
It'll be big.
But he bet not mess up our field.
The speculation is that Tony Vitello and or Peyton Manning will be walking out with him to the stage.
Of course.
I ain't got no problem
Gotta
with this.
have
Real
some
quick
big
though,
name.
as long as he ain't as long as he ain't soliciting us the same way that Kenny Chesney does, like
Oh no, he doesn't. For college teams, he does not wear other
pick a
jerseys.
side.
He does for major, like he's a Braves fan,
Okay,
but he wore a Phillies jersey when he played Citizen Bank Park, which I do not love, of course. Granted, I mean, he's wearing the jersey of a team that hasn't won a World Series in a long time.
Yeah.
But for Tennessee, he's not putting on like Florida football jerseys or Alabama jerseys.
or Pitt. Like Kenny throws a monster show in Pittsburgh.
I know.
Okay, I ain't
New
mad
England.
at Kenny.
He always does New
My
England.
homie Inky does it. I ain't got no problem with it, but I need to know
Bills
your
to pay.
allegiance.
Coming up next, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network this morning has updated the status of Packers quarterback Jordan Love for Sunday's game. We will tell you what he said next.